This is Henry. I haven't seen Henry in, a year maybe now. I kind of miss seeing him. There's another heron that's in the area a little bit. One that's only a few months old. I don't know if he'll stay in the area or not. But the last time I saw Henry, I had no idea it was going to be the last time I saw Henry. This is my grandson. I see him a lot. I almost didn't get to see him ever. This is my fish tank. About a week or so ago, I almost had to tear it down, and I wouldn't have had my fish tank anymore. This is my Nikon Z8. Now, what is the common thread between Henry, my grandson, this fish tank, and my Nikon Z8? I'll explain. Hey, welcome to another video. I've spoken many times in my previous videos about a friend of mine, Tom, who towards the end of his life, I can't say took care of him because he was in a nursing home, but I was in charge of his estate. I was his healthcare surrogate, so if anything went wrong with him inside the facility where he was staying, they would call me, and I'd go visit him pretty much every day. And one time he called me and he said, I'm really not feeling very well. Now, we knew he had an issue and he needed to have surgery, only they wouldn't put him in the hospital at the time because it was during COVID. And they knew if he did get COVID because of the health condition he was in, he never would have survived. So they were taking the chance that they could put off the surgery long enough to where COVID would calm down a little bit, then they could he could have his surgery. Didn't work out that way, unfortunately. And so he called me one day, he said, I'm really not feeling well. And I said, well, tell the nurse and let's see what they do. So they put him in the hospital, and the next time I saw him was when he passed away, and he could no longer speak. His blood pressure was just too low. And so that last conversation with him, I didn't know was going to be the last conversation I was going to have with him. A year later, almost to the day, my mom had a stroke. And so I was in the hospital visiting with her, and she seemed fine. She was doing okay. She wasn't really slurring her words or anything. She seemed like she was going to recover. And I think it was later that night or the next morning, she had another stroke before I could see her again. And so again, I didn't know that last conversation I had with her was going to be the last conversation I was going to have with her. Several years ago, I had heart surgery, and then I had complications from it. I did another video on it. If you want to hear all about it for some reason, you can go back and watch that video. But the bottom line was I wasn't supposed to survive the surgery I had for the blood clots that were in my lungs. It just was such a long shot for me to get off that operating table, yet good Lord says here I still am. And at the time, my daughter was pregnant with my first grandson. So obviously, had I passed, I never would have met my first grandson. So the point is, you never know when your last day is. It's not promised. Now, how does that relate to this fish tank and that Z8? Well, as I started to get better, there wasn't a whole lot I could do, so I started this fish tank. A week or so ago, we were having some issues with the house, and they were going to have to do some work, and the only way they could really do the work properly was to tear down this fish tank and tear down the other fish tank that I have right around the corner there. Well, we did some of the work, and we're probably going to have to do more within a year or so. So I may end up losing that fish tank. And I've spent 7 years growing that fish tank. But last week, when I thought, man, out of nowhere, this could be the last day. You just don't know. And yeah, it's only a fish tank, but man, anyone that has a fish tank will know you put your heart and soul into that thing. It's a lot it's a lot of work. And so for someone to just stranger walk in your house and say, all right, that's got to go. When? Well, by the end of the month. What? You know, it's kind of a jolt. So again, you just don't know. You don't know. So after Tom passed and my mom passed, like a lot of people during COVID, you sit in your house and you watch a lot of YouTube videos. And I started to discover the Thomas Heatons of the world and the Gavin Hardcastles and Nick Page, and Adam Gibbs, Nigel Danson, later on James Popsis, you know the names, and many more. But I was at a stage where, yeah, I was still doing a little bit of photography, but it just wasn't really a driving passion at that time. But I decided after watching these videos I was going to really try to focus on it more again, and eventually I started this YouTube channel. I had done a lot of photography maybe 8 years before that, 10 years before that, because my kids were in high school and I was working freelance for Max Preps, and I was using a Nikon D700, and the old 80-200 F2.8 lens was my workhorse, which I did another video on a while back. Not the 70-200, it's an 80-200. And I later had a D750 and a D850, but you could see that the market was going to go to mirrorless. And because I had all this downtime, because of my surgeries and all, I considered switching over to Sony, but I stayed within the Nikon ecosystem. Now at the time, Sony was way ahead of Nikon in the mirrorless world, which is why I considered switching over. But I stayed loyal to Nikon, and I stayed in their ecosystem, and I eventually sold off my f-mount lenses and went to a Nikon Z7II, which is what I'm filming on right now, and I just picked up a couple of prime lenses and I went from there. And you would think that my drive for photography would only increase with new gear. Well, it did for a short period of time. And then the problem was I was trying to shoot sports and wildlife along with landscapes and portraits on the Z7II. And landscapes and portraits, it was fine. But with the wildlife, I'd get some shots, but in my mind, I was missing far too many. And the same with sports. Man, I was just missing focus. Part of it was probably me, part of it was probably the camera, and some of it was I was using a Tamron 70-300 lens that the autofocus just isn't quite as snappy as some of the other lenses that I use. So it was a combination of all those things, and I started to get frustrated again. Didn't pick up the camera quite as much anymore. But I knew I still had this passion, this drive to want to do photography. I just wanted to do it. I decided to pull some of my resources together, sell off the remaining F-mount equipment I had, and my buddy Tom had left me a little bit of money. So I put that together and bought the Z8. And then what happened was my passion for photography came back stronger than ever, because I could go find Henry almost every day for like a year. I'd go and search out Henry because I knew where he would be, and I would take photographs of Henry and other things. And then I'd go and photograph my grandson playing soccer. He was young at the time, 4 or 5, whatever. But it really, my keepers increased dramatically when it came to sports and wildlife. And so it only drove my passion to do even more. I guess the point of this video is, it doesn't matter what camera brand you buy. It doesn't matter what camera, they all make good equipment now. They just do. They all make good lenses. They all make good camera bodies. However, when the question of does gear really matter? Yes, it does matter in respects to you get the gear that works best for you. and don't have regrets. You know, I was having regrets getting that Z7 II. I have to admit it. When I got up to the Z8, now I don't have the regrets. After going through everything we went through with my heart surgery and losing a good friend of mine and losing my mom, you know, you realize that just, you know, tomorrow's not promised. And so there's no sense of sitting on your pile of money and not being happy. If you're really passionate about something, it doesn't have to be photography. But if it is photography and you need a different camera body to really drive that passion, I'm not good at spending other people's money, but spend your money. Go get what you really want that'll make you happy. Because again, tomorrow's not promised. And if you can be happier with whatever it is, a Leica M11 instead of a Leica Q2, or a Leica Q2 instead of a Leica M11, or a Fuji 100S instead of a crop sensor camera, whatever it is, just get the gear that will do what it is you're trying to do. For me, it's the Nikon Z8. And you could say, well, why not a Z9? It's too heavy. You know, I don't need it. I like the little bit lighter body. Yeah, the Z8 is still heavier than the Z7II, and I wish it was the same, but it's not that much heavier. But that's the camera body that does what I need to do, what I like to do, which is an all-around camera. That's why I shoot the Nikon Z8, and that's why I would recommend it. Now, each brand has their all-around camera, maybe not. I know Hasselblad with that X2D, I don't even think it has video on it, right? I mean, it's just a plain stills camera. And yeah, I don't really use a lot of video with the Z8, even though I've started to get into it a little bit more because I use this Z7 II. So I'm probably going to go to the Z8, start using that more for video. Is the Hasselblad a better landscape camera than the Nikon Z8? Yeah, probably. I'm sure most people would say it is. But is it a better all-around camera than the Z8? Yeah, I don't want to get in and debate all these things. The point is, gear matters to the extent that get the gear that does what you need to do and don't have regrets. Just get what you want and you'll be much happier. And that passion that maybe you've lost it, maybe it'll come back. So that's my only message for the day. I hope maybe it resonates. My next video, I think I'm going to do one where I shoot some flowers and take it all the way through, photograph some flowers, take it all the way through and make a platinum print and try to sell that print. I know a lot of people don't want to buy prints. I get it. Photographers don't like buying other photographers' images a whole lot. I get it. But I want to donate some of the profit, if not all the profit, to a couple different charities. So maybe you can come along and help me with that. So if you haven't liked and subscribed yet, do it please, and look forward to that video coming out in another week or two. Anyway, till then, take good care. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.